Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. I almost forgot my own show intro because I was in Tampa over the weekend having an amazing time. And of course, our guest this week needs no introduction, but we'll get one anyway because need is not the basis on which we make decisions. Dave Smith, host of Part of the Problem, 1/3 Legion of Skanks, and his comedy special Libertas is available. You can get it on YouTube though for free.
It's on my YouTube channel. I put it out for free.
Yeah. So people have been bugging me a lot about the whole GameStop thing. And from all the responses, it seemed to me something that I would personally find downright pornographic. And instead of me sitting down and doing the homework, I thought, we just asked you, you've covered it on your show. Mm-hmm. So so you get to explain it to me, and then people can get to see my reaction of pure joy, because from everything I've seen, this is like just put in my veins.
It is Michael Malice porn on every level. It has everything that you would want, and perhaps...
You mean children?
Yes, exactly. Just little... Oh, God, that's going to haunt us for years.
Those dead children?
Yes.
Ooh, I'm a ghost now with duct tape on my mouth.
Oh, you shouldn't have killed me. Okay, so perhaps the best aspect of all of this is that it, much like the best aspect of the whole Trump moment, is that it lured the cathedral into an untenable state.
Yes.
So Donald Trump, in many ways, his best quality was that he was able to kind of, almost like lure a cat out of the bushes. Like the deep state academia, the corporate press, all couldn't resist the treat that was Donald Trump. And then they came out, and now they're exposed to everybody else in the sunlight. And so basically what happened with the GameStop thing is it originated on the Reddit page Wall Street Bets, which is a big Reddit community of, I believe they have over 4 million people, or they had over 4 million people. They've probably got some extra feds in there now. But they put together a strategy to counter the hedge funds that were all shorting GameStop. So But
can you explain what shorting means?
Sure. So shorting is a financial technique that's used primarily by people with a lot of money because it's a very risky strategy. It's basically a way to bet against a stock. So you're betting on the stock going down. So what you do when you short sell is you borrow stock at the current price and you sell it. And then you have to buy it back to return it to who you borrowed it for. So you have an obligation to buy back the stock. But so, for example, if you borrow a stock at $10 a share, you sell it at $10 a share. If it goes down to $5 a share, you can then buy it back at $5 a share and return it, and you pocket the difference. So you can now.
And the more the stock falls, the more profitable it is for you. So you're selling now and buying later. It's a reversal of the normal market techniques.
Exactly.
Where I buy a car now and I'm going to sell it to you next week. It's going to cost me money, right?
Sure. So if you're buying a stock, you're essentially betting on it going up. If you short a stock, you're betting on it going down. However, the downside to shorting is that you can lose a lot. So let
me ask this. The thing with difference with buying and selling is if I'm buying a stock, I can hold it in perpetuity. I can write it out, wait for it to go up again, hopefully in the future. If I'm shorting, I have to execute the completion of this transaction, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you have an obligation. Myself in a corner, yeah.
Yes. So you paint yourself in a corner, but also, to my example, right? If a stock is at $10 a share and you short it, and let's say it goes all the way down to like a penny a share, well, that basically is the most you can make. you can make
100%
your
profit.
$9.99, you know, right? But what can you lose? Well, that's near infinite. I mean, if the stock could go up to $20, $30, $100,000, $1 billion. I mean, it's unlikely, but the one of the reasons why hedge funds use this tactic, whereas regular people don't tend to, is that you're kind of incapable of covering the potential loss of it all. So the hedge funds.
Oh, I just want to make that clear to people. So there's a big asymmetry because the floor is the stock goes to effectively $0.
Yes.
But there's no ceiling. The ceiling is
right.
the sky. So right. So there's a big asymmetry there.
But when the hedge funds get together and they all short a company, usually they can manipulate the market enough to get the results that they wanted out of it.
Because then it seems like an organic wave. If enough people, they call them whales, I believe. If enough people are forcing a market to move in a certain direction, that price is an indicator of something. And me as a random person, if I'm not aware that they're all doing this, it'll be like, okay, this stock is going down. That'll encourage me to sell. And the more people sell, that drives the price down. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because they can make the market.
Right. Now, there's also some like fundamental aspects to the GameStop stock. So like GameStop, their stock has been doing very bad for a few years, and a lot of that is because people are buying video games online. And so it just in the same way that Barnes and Nobles and Blockbusters and all these other stores they have real competition with online purchasing now. GameStop has had that same problem. They've been trying to transition their business model to online sales, particularly in 2020, where a whole bunch of their stores were shut down throughout the year. So there's other fundamentals that are going on there too. But basically, this Reddit group got wind of the fact that this stock was incredibly shorted. Like it was all these major hedge funds were shorting the stock, and it's not a surprise because this doesn't take much wisdom to be like, all right, Blockbuster, right? If you tell me you think Blockbuster is a safe bet, it's going to go up or down a year from now, it's going to be like, come on, we all know where this is going. Exactly right. So these Reddit investors got together and basically figured out that if they all buy this stock, they could drive the price up. And because so many hedge funds had shorted the stock, they were obligated to buy it back at the market price. And they figured it out and they did it. And they bled them. There was one.
Wait, I don't understand. Where does white supremacy enter into all this?
Oh, no, we'll get to it. It's after the Russians get involved. That's when the white supramists start
as night follows day.
Yes, exactly. Yes, right. So there was one report on Reuters that said that $70 billion had been lost by hedge funds in this. Like they got them, and they got them good. And so basically the whole cathedral has been freaking out because not only the fact that this was, it was a transfer of wealth from the hedge fund class, the Wall Street class, to regular investors, which is not how the system's supposed to work.
Right.
It's supposed to work quite the opposite way. So they're all freaking out about this. And in addition to it, I think that that they're concerned that they can't do this, that nothing's stopping them from doing this again. That, now okay, so
stop. Wait, come on, you're going too fast. You can't play porn for me and not pause for me to ruin my pants and put on new pants. Hold on.
So it's a beautiful story.
Yeah. Wait. So by the way, I'm being told they shorted 140% of the stock. So it was a huge amount. It was more than all. So
I know it was more than 100%. I didn't know the 140% number.
So that's why even a small amount is going to screw people enormously.
Exactly.
What is amazing, I remember this happened many years ago. Dan Savage, who was a sex columnist, I'm sure still is, he had when Rick Santorum was making very anti-gay statements in his kind of Christian conservative view, which you're obviously a big fan of, and Dan Savage had a contest like, let's redefine the term Santorum, and they had a discussion, him and his fans. And what they decided to do is Santorum is the term for the mix of feces and semen after you have sex with another dude, right? But enough people use that term in that way that it became the top Google search result for the word Santorum. But then corporate media types were saying Dan Savage hacked into Google and they had to be explained, this is not a hack, this is an exploit. This is how Google organically ranks search results. It's not based on what you think is good or bad. It's based on how people are using and sharing this term. No one went into Google's code, learned to code, and were like, blah, blah,
Right.
Santorum is going to be #1, right? So, but that's how they presented it. And this is kind of a similar situation where it's like they played by the rules.
Yes.
They didn't do anything where it's just like we went in and we changed their computers. You know, there's always a guy in a laptop in these movies like, all right, I'm just going to, they're clicking keys furiously. They played by the rules that had been set against them.
Yes.
And they used those rules to win. And those rules, as you were just saying, are still in there. So not only can this happen again, there's nothing at that moment stopping it from happening again.
Right. So the thing that's so remarkable about it is that it's a rigged game against them. And they still found a way within those rules to win. And so now everyone's freaking out going like, these rules are not fair. They shouldn't be manipulating the media. And it's like, dude, they won despite the fact that every regulation in the financial sector is written in the favor of these big hedge funds. And so it's really a beautiful thing to watch. And now, as you kind of alluded to, there are all of these stories about, like Jimmy Kimmel the other night said it might be Russian interference. There's been all types of story about racists and Trump supporters. But the thing that's really beautiful about it is that it happened so quickly. It caught them so by surprise that they didn't even really have time to formulate a counter argument. So they're just throwing all the usual buzzwords at the wall. But I really think this is even too ridiculous for many people who might be convinced in other situations. Like they're like, wait a minute, you're telling me there's a Russian plot to buy up U.S. stocks?
Or the white nationalists hate Wall Street for some reason.
Like what? This just doesn't make any sense.
Oh my, this is beautiful. So what have been some of the, this is why I'm so, one of the reasons I'm always so optimistic about the future is because I don't think who we're up against are very clever or strategic or sophisticated. You and I think have discussed before, like, what would I do if I were the Biden administration, how to try to mitigate this contempt and growing animus, and frankly, it breaks into violence sometimes. Like this is a real problem for everybody. And everything they're doing just seems to be like, just double down, double down, double down. We're just going to make you wear to the point where we're going to make you wear 2 masks, where it's just like, this is like a parody of doubling down. Yeah.
And it's a great example of a lot of the stuff that we've talked about for years, where you talk about the kind of the regulation of the marketplace versus the regulation of the government. So what you have right now is a lot of people demanding that the government find some way to regulate this. Like we can't allow all these people to just collude together and, like make these bets that can disrupt the market or whatever they're claiming. But the truth is, many people, especially people on the left, and with some degree of fairness, have said that the wild speculation of some of these hedge funds is really damaging to the economy. They end up people are making billions of dollars off speculating in these really kind of crazy ways.
This is what they blamed 2008 for.
Yes, right. This was one of the major reasons that they blamed it. Now, that being said, for all of the regulatory state that's been built up, and the financial industry is one of the most heavily, if not the most heavily regulated sector in the economy. It's incredibly regulated. I mean, you cannot operate a brokerage firm without just constant compliance with regulators. I mean, like every single move that you make. For all of this, they've never done anything to slow down, hedge fund speculation. But look what just happened right here. Now, as you pointed out, they were so overexposed that they had shorted 140% of the company. You think they'll think twice about doing that again? Quite possibly. If there's no regulation that comes in that stops this from happening again, they're probably going to make sure that they're not shorting a stock that much, because they know they're just throwing an easy opportunity for a bunch of people on Reddit to make them pay through the nose. So this is kind of the beautiful self-regulation of free markets where you can go, oh, okay, well, yeah, you guys can short the hell out of this company, but you know what? If you overexpose yourself, then we can come in and buy it up and force you to pay us money for it. So it's like a really great example of the way that the market regulates itself. However, on the other side of it, there was one of the big things that happened was Robinhood shut down the stock. And actually, I shouldn't even say that. They allowed you to sell it.
But not
they
to
allowed
buy
you
it.
to sell it, but you couldn't buy any more of it. They wouldn't let you keep driving up the price. And now they're claiming that they were all doing this for some reason of compliance or something like that. But a lot of people have pointed out that I think it's Citadel is the name of the fund that owns about 30% of them. And they were one of these hedge funds who had been shorting GameStop. So it seems much more likely that this was some real corruption and that they were stopping their customers from, driving this price up anymore.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit because in terms of their future behavior, there's a concept in accounting called taking a bath, right? So let's suppose you're a hedge fund manager and you're trying to make money for your clients. Something like this, if they're blue-pilled enough, will give you a good excuse if you're not underperforming to be like, look, under normal market conditions, you'd be up this much, but because of internet trolls gaming the system, you lost all this money. It's not our fault, blah, 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 blah. And then it's like, oh, I'm a victim of these trolls. How terrible. And so there is an easy opportunity for them to continue to exploit this to their own advantage at passing the buck on to their own naive customers.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that could be one strategy that they pursue, and probably to some degree they are. However, it still does seem that one way or the other, say Robinhood for sure, I think exposed themselves to their own base and really damaged their reputation. And I'm not the first to make this, observation, but like their name is fucking Robin Hood. Their whole point, they claim that they're all about like democratizing the marketplace and things like this. Yet in this one example where regular investors were really winning, they came in and shut it down. So I think they've damaged themselves quite severely.
Yeah, you can't unring the bell. You have shown that under certain circumstances, regardless of my ideology, I go to you in order to buy and sell assets. And in circumstances which I would not be privy to ahead of time, you are just going to make me unable to buy or sell assets as you deem fit. That does not make you a reliable arbiter, if that's the correct term here, for someone I'm going to use in order to trade commodities.
Yes. And if it's not corruption, there is certainly the appearance of corruption. And it's not just that you're randomly choosing to not let me buy this stock. It's that you're doing it and it's benefiting people who are partnered up in your company and a lot of other hedge funds, very powerful people.
But even best case scenario, if you're not corrupt, you're still taking it upon yourself to, so even giving you every benefit of the doubt, you are still not a reliable resource for me to use for the service I am looking to for you that you claim to give. It's just like the cops. It's like, oh, we'll protect you and keep you safe, unless a lot of people are marching the street. In which case, well, if they go burn down your house, that's a shame. You should have moved somewhere else. So, okay. This is what I had gleaned from reading between the lines, and what I was delighted by was, Jon Stewart, I know, came out in support of these Redditors. This is something that historically there are still elements of the left, and I don't think there's small elements, who view, understandably, Wall Street as the enemy, who are at best uncomfortable with siding with giant corporations against the little guy. And when you have a case like this where the little guys, make cash while hedge fund managers who are like in leftist mythology, the scum of the earth, are taking a bath, on an emotional level for a lefty, it's really hard for them to be like, no, the hedge fund managers are the good guys in this case and only in this case. It's like, really?
And traditionally, when the left would say, Wall Street are the bad guys, and then boomer cons would say, no, that's capitalism. The left is way closer to the truth than the
Oh, yeah.
Boomercons are. I mean, the idea that the Wall Street complex has anything to do with laissez-faire market organic capitalism is complete nonsense. It is a complete government program. It's all run by the Federal Reserve. It's all the big banks are propped up by the Federal Reserve, which is, they pretend to be a private company, but it's like if Wall Street was created by, if Walmart was created by an act of Congress, and then every few years the CEO was appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate, and then you said, well, Walmart's just a private company, I think you'd be like, wait, what?
Yeah,
No, they're not a private company at all. Like, yeah, this is clearly a government. The Federal Reserve is the government Department of Money and Banking, and they just claim to be a private company, so they don't even have to deal with any of the oversight that a department of government would have to go through. But yeah, this whole thing's propped up by them, and the artificially low interest rates are the reason why you have all of this wild speculation to begin with. This is why people are drawn into making all these crazy bets rather than just like saving their money or just, like buying some common sense commodity. This is all, the left is completely right when they say that Wall Street are the villains.
It's funny because I'm now getting to a point with my public platform that the ANCOMs, the anarcho-communists, are starting to get really upset that I am the one who's like representing anarchism for many people and introduced them to that concept. Even though I have the receipts, I always bend over backwards to point out that the original anarchists were hard left. I sing the praises of Emma Goldman constantly. I had an episode on Tom Wood's very failed show about Emma Goldman, and he was saying nice things about her. So they really hate Rothbard and the ANCAPs because they regard it as a perversion of anarchism.
Understandably.
Understandably.
It is to some degrray.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we did steal their word. Certainly, I mean, like, our word got stolen by liberals, right? Like, really, that's what, like the tradition that Rothbard came out of was the liberals. That's what Mises self-identified as, was a liberal. And then all of these, lefties stole our word. And so we were like, okay, well, now we got these ANCOM suckers, we could just take their word from them. It's like a big brother who was abused by the father who started hitting the little brother. I'm sorry. You got caught in a cycle. It's bad.
Well, no, what I was saying is I'm glad that I had a tweet like 5 months ago, maybe I got the dates wrong, but at a certain time ago, where I said, we've seen a systemic assault on small business and middle America for the past years at the behest, literal destruction with the burning down the rioting and then the lockdowns on behalf of corporate America. I said the hard left version is far closer to the truth than most people realize. So yeah, it's just repeating what you were saying. This is something Rothbard always railed about. This is a big distinction between him and Rand. Rand had an essay called America's Persecuted Minority Big Business. And, she put it in an inflammatory framework, and her points were valid that it's always, they're always the whipping boy. But in terms of corporate and the villains of Atlas Shrugged were corporatist colluders with the government. She said explicitly the worst economic phenomenon is a statist businessman. But Rothbard, he never paused in his contempt for these corporate types who, use the state back from the day to kind of finagle the market in their favor.
Well, yeah, and I think also because Rothbard was more of a historian, whereas Rand was more of a philosopher. They were both dabbled in both, but Rothbard was more of an historian, economist, and Rand was more of a pure philosopher. That Rothbard knew the history, particularly in this country. And the truth is that and this is another thing that the left is absolutely right about, is that they're correct about, not be so confusing, is that it was big business interests who bought off the government to make it this huge government to begin with. That was really what drove it. And the truth is that all of these guys, many of them were real winners in the free market, and deservingly so. Like John D. Rockefeller really did build up Standard Oil, and he didn't do it initially with government help. He did it in the market. But then he went into the government and bought off politicians to do his bidding. So it's not as if these big companies are like just there and persecuted by the government. They're the ones, in many cases, who are creating the big government policies for their own benefit. And to your point, yeah, Rand did write about this in a lot of her fiction books, like that they were always the villains as well.
Hey guys, today we're welcoming back Ipvanish to the show. What is Ipvanish? It's a virtual private network, VPN for you boomers. It's a super important tool that helps you safely browse the internet. You could use it on your computer, your tablet, your phone, everything. When you use a VPN, your data is encrypted. It's important because what you're doing on the internet isn't my business and it's no one else's business either. Ipvanish helps you remain anonymous and secure on the internet, which is something we could all use. If you go to ipvanish.com/malice, you could get 65% off. It's just $3.49 a month or $28 a year. Here's what you get with Ipvanish. Anonymous IP addresses. Your personal IP address can't be tracked. Circumvent any online censorship. Get protection when using public Wi-Fi. And 24/7 support. Email them, chat with them, call them. They're there to help, and you're getting 65% off. Not too shabby. If you go to ipvanish.com/malice, you can claim your 65% off savings. Show these guys some love. They're repeat sponsors. And remember, it's ipvanish.com/malice to get the deal and start protecting yourself online today. Let's get back to the show. Are you following? It's just also always funny to me when people are so like, how can you be hopeful? Or there's no points of hope. Another one, which just happened this past week, was the New York Times turning on Governor Cuomo. And I just replied this to Jake Tapper. This is like when Frankenstein turns on his monster. It's like you covered for him. You gave him awards. You valorized him as a hero, even though New York had the highest per capita death rate of anywhere. And somehow this is a great thing. It's like it's a complete perversion of follow the science. But finally, they've turned against him, and and he's going back and saying, "I don't trust the experts." Then, upon what authority, even ostensible authority, are you making these decisions to drive people out of work?
Yeah. And particularly with this scandal, it was downplaying the number of people that died in nursing homes due to his order.
This isn't like I lost my ice cream shop, Ice and Vice, which I'm still ass mad about. This is death. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, and this is the entire narrative has been built for the last year around we have to save grandma. That's what this is like all been about, supposedly. And so to see that he would, I mean, in what other area have they downplayed the number of COVID deaths? They've been trying to drum up fear about this since last March. Yet in this one area, they're downplaying the damage of the virus because it would directly, reflect on the policies of this one blue governor. And it's been really something. And I can't believe, I'm actually shocked that so much of this change happened so quickly after Joe Biden got in. I thought they would have to wait a little bit more to at least pretend, but it's almost as if they're trying to confirm the suspicion that so many of us have had that a huge motivating factor in all of this was that it was a presidential election year and they really wanted Donald Trump out. But the fact that the tune has changed so much and Joe Biden's been president for 2 weeks is pretty hard to avoid.
Have you seen the press secretary, Jennifer Psaki, start to lose it in that room? So just earlier today, as we were recording this on Monday, it was absolutely hilarious. So we all have verbal tics. It's hard to lose them. Her job is an extremely difficult one. You have to go in front of the White House press corps every day. You don't know what the questions are going to be. There's myriad questions. Some of them are going to be hostile. Even when you're a Democratic operative, so I'm old enough to remember the Clintons absolutely despised the press with good reason, because the press was to some extent uncovering their depravities. And so she had a verbal tic. She just goes, we'll have to circle back on this one. And people got, clowning her on this, whatever, on Twitter. This is, as far as the things that were said about Kayleigh McEnany and Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I mean, this is a 1 out of 100. And just today, she was like, oh, well, I know conservative Twitter is going to be upset, but I'm going to circle back on this later. We're going to do that a lot. And it's like, it was so beautiful, and Molly Hemingway retweeted this tweet of mine, where you and I know enough of these people that we know for a fact that they sit and they obsess over their mentions, but because they think they're above it all and holier than thou, they're not going to people ask me sometimes, like, why do you reply to this person? He had 20 followers. I'm like, do you want me to do a background check? Like, before I look, should I just hover it and be like, how many followers does this person have? Or you just look at the data as it comes in? And because they think they're better than everyone, they won't reply to all these attacks, but they're sitting there stewing because they're not getting not just the respect, the veneration that they deserve. And I got to tell her, it's going to get a lot worse.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's really interesting about all of that, too, is that say whatever you will about the Trump administration and Kayleigh McKenna and all of that. Is that, am I saying her name right? McEnany. I'm sorry. I knew I got that wrong. But she was like a warrior, and she went in there every day knowing what she was dealing with. Like, you are going to get they're here to ruin you. Like, as a person, they are here to ruin you. They're here to get you to say something that you will never have the career you could have going forward because you said it. So she would go in for war. And the pressure that the Biden administration is getting is not a fraction of the pressure that Trump was getting. It's almost like we just have to act like we're asking you somewhat tough questions. We can't give away the whole game. And she's already kind of wilting under that pressure. So it's just like, and it's still so close. Like, it's only a few weeks away from when it was Trump in there, that you can't make people forget. Like, Americans have a short attention span, but it's not that short. Like, we can remember a month ago. And so, yeah, it's interesting to watch all of it. It's really fascinating. I think one of a really big red pill opportunity is just how much the corporate press, it's really unbelievable that Joe Biden comes in there and it's like snap in a day. In a day, they have a completely different attitude about the presidency. Now, I saw Brian Stelter did a whole piece on his show about how Fox News is all doom and gloom. And he's like looking over their highlights and they're like, oh, every time a Democrat gets elected president, they act like the country's over. And you're like, dude,
oh my God,
you cannot seriously think we're all going to forget how CNN reacted to Trump being president. And like, he's not completely wrong. I mean, it is kind of true about Fox News, like there are all this Joe Biden, Hannity's like, Joe Biden's ruining America and all of this, but like, come on. As if you guys didn't do the same thing when Donald Trump got in there. At least everyone knows Fox News is the Republican cable news channel. Like, CNN, you're pretending to be the fair ones. So come on.
I think that's absolutely hilarious. I haven't been following that. Hey guys, want to tell you about Fume. It's our new sponsor. If you go to FUMessential.com and use code Malice10, you get 10% off your entire order. This is what Fume is. It's not a vape. It's not a cigarette. It's a hollow piece of wood with cores infused with the benefits of the world's super plants. So you feel in your hand like you're holding the equivalent of a cigarette. You take the core, you shred it a little. It's kind of like the styrofoamy texture, and then you can inhale it. So it's a great way to transition from the disgusting smoking habit to something that has no health consequences whatsoever. People playing with their hands is a big issue with former smokers, that ritual of smoking. This is a great way to transition. There's a bunch of those different cores which focus on different flavor and aroma. So you have the peppermint one, freshens your breath. The lavender relaxes you. You've got the black pepper cores, which help you quit. They're all sustainably produced in Calgary, Alberta, with Canadian maple. They look really cool. I got to tell you, it looks like a steampunk vape. So if you go to FUMessential.com, FUMessential.com, and use promo code Malice10, you get 10% off your order. Let's get back to the show. The fact that you have Jake Tapper calling out Andrew Cuomo, you and I and other people have been wondering, what are they going to do without Trump to kick around? And there have been some theories. Some is they're just going to keep bringing him up. I never thought that was cogent because I remember very well George W. was in a very similar position with Trump with better reason. And they kept attacking him for a bit, but as soon as he was gone, it was all about Obama's the savior, and they quickly forgot about him. So that I didn't think was going to happen. Then the question is, okay, they're going to find a new bad guy. Is it going to be Mitch McConnell in the same way that Newt Gingrich was the kind of booger man for a few years? But now it looks like there really are, as you and I have said before, it's like, imagine if you're a boomer con and you think Obama was born in Kenya and he's a Marxist and a Muslim. And then in 2012, Mitt Romney got elected president. Yeah, you'd be happy. But then they'd wake up in January, they'd be like, oh my God, Mitt Romney's president. Like so I think a lot of these hardcore lefties who despise Trump and blah, 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 these are the people who rejected Biden during the primaries.
Yeah.
And now he's their president, and it's going to be like, okay, you have a trans person as one of your officials, and you stop the wall, but you're not. I've not seen anything other than those 2 executive orders that shows that he's interested in governing from the hard left. I've seen everything that says he actually believes, let's sit down with these moderate Republicans and try to make it work, not in ways that you and I would like, but certainly not in ways that they would like, because now they've got their own in there supposedly, but they don't.
Right. And as me and you both predicted this, I mean, this was a pretty easy guess to make. I mean, just look at Joe Biden's career. This is what he's always been. And in many ways, one of his most compelling moments of the whole election season was when, Trump kept saying he was a Trojan horse for socialism. And he gave that speech and he said, come on, you know me. Do you really think I'm some secret socialist? And of course, it's like, no, you're a secret socialist. You're the credit card company's man in the Senate.
Exactly.
Like, what? No, you're a corrupt politician, and that's what you'll continue to be. So I think you're right about that. But I also think that there's another dynamic that's going on at the same time, which is that the corporate press has almost been I try to think of an analogy of this, but it's almost like if you're like diluting the gold coins, you're like cutting gold coins, melting them down more and more and more. And all of a sudden you get to a point where you're like, these don't even look like gold anymore. Like, I don't know how we're going to pass these off.
Yeah.
But so there's been this kind of growing, it's like, okay, everyone who disagrees with progressives is a racist. And then after a while, everyone's been called racist so much that like the term just doesn't carry that much weight. It's been diluted too much. So it's like, okay, fascist, okay, Nazi, Russian collusion, okay, insurrection,
right.
And they keep
Sedition.
going. And then at a certain point, they're like, we've burned out all of our terms and I don't know what to call you, because now, I mean, I saw them when they were saying, when Jimmy Kimmel said the thing, that he said the guys on Reddit, the investors may have been Russian, infiltrators. And it's just, you just see all of social media just rolling their eyes at this. Like, guys, you can't just go back to the Russia collusion hoax because like you don't have anything else to say. And so this is something that is a huge white pill to me, is that after, it's almost like they're out of it. Like whatever the next enemy becomes.
They're throwing the stapler at the monster. We all know those movies. You're running, you're shooting it, the bullets bounce off, then you're throwing like a bowling ball, and now you're just throwing a stapler, and the monster's like, what? I don't even, am I supposed to be confused by this? Like, a stapler's not going to hurt a child.
Yeah. Or there'd be like the ones where they'd shoot till the bullets are gone, and then they throw the gun, where you're like, well, if the bullets didn't get him, probably the gun barrel.
Now he's got a gun.
Yeah, that's right. He's got your bullets and your gun now. But so that's, so I think there's something really amazing about that, because once you remove all of these like wild personal attacks, then what you're left with is just the ideas. And that's ultimately what we want to get to. I tweeted something out the other day where I was like, has there been one hardcore anti-war activist in this country who was not personally labeled with the worst insults, the worst ad hominems, like, racist, homophobe, sexist, Russian spy, or some other thing like that? And people are going through it. People are struggling to find one. I saw people who they'd be like Martin Luther King, and you're like, do you know what MLK was called while he was still alive?
I know.
Like, no, yeah, after his death, he was lionized and he becomes like the hero in the holiday. But no. When he was alive, the FBI was trying to convince him to kill himself.
Yeah.
Like they were, and you realize that it's like, oh yeah, no, this is a tactic that anyone who threatens the establishment is going to get labeled with all the worst names in the book. And so if you can just, once those labels lose their meaning, then you're on the verge of something really special happening. And
also, once your technique of using labels loses its power. So then it becomes not even about Ben Shapiro. So Ben Shapiro is my metric for like blue-pilled conservatives, right? Yeah. So if Ben Shapiro is getting it, then I can assume that the boomer cons are getting it. And that is really reassuring. Like if it's, because I have like very little confidence that he's going to perceive things from you and I angle, other than the stuff we talk about when we're in shul together, but we can't talk about that in front of Goyim. So he just had this tweet just a couple of hours ago where he goes, the talking point from the left these days about cancel culture is that it doesn't exist if you're the one doing it, but does exist if it's happening to you. So this Schrodinger's kind of vacillation between something exists in one context, doesn't exist in another, he's calling out the technique. And by calling out the technique, you don't have to sit there and be like, yes, cancel culture exists. Here's some examples. You're like, okay, I see what you're doing. I'm not going to try arguing with you in good faith. You are not acting in good faith. This is just a tactic of yours. And now we can proceed accordingly. It saves people a lot of time, a lot of headache, and it's a much more effective strategy. Let me just talk to you about something Jimmy Kimmel had said not that long ago, which is just why I think he's just really one of the worst out there. During the Capitol Hill insurrection or the rioting, whatever you want to call it, he had this monologue and he goes, if you're going to compare it to the Black Lives Matter, that's not just wrong, it's stupid. Because those were people marching for their rights and stopping from oppression. And this was trying to overthrow the election, which is our right. And it goes, 5 minutes ago, the people who were rioting and burning down stores and committing violence had nothing to do with Black Lives Matter, remember? You were saying you guys are painting it all with the same brush. No, the Black Lives Matter protests are peaceful and are pushing for change. These rioters are against what Black Lives Matter is about. Now it's like, oh, well, yeah, they were. So this vacillation between, it's like the meme with the two buttons. The rioters didn't represent Black Lives Matter, and now it's the rioters were only fighting for their freedoms. It's like the story shifts so dynamically, and this was the downfall in the Soviet Union. My mom, I was born there, of course, as people know. I asked my mom about what it was like very frequently, because my mom isn't particularly savvy or bright in terms of politics. She doesn't care. I don't blame her for not caring. You and I are the ones who are stupid and weird, because we care about this stuff. Like, what you should do is raise your family, do good at your job, and make yourself a better person. You'll be a lot happier than us.
Yes.
So I said, how persuasive was this to you, as a kid? And she's like, not at all. Because one year it's like, okay, this one, Yagida, he's the greatest person ever. He's a hero of the revolution, hero of the Soviet Union. The next year, oh, Yagida's been terrible. He's always been terrible. How could anyone like him? This guy's been a traitor of the revolution since day one. And then sometimes they revert back like, oh my God, Yagida, he's our hero. And she's like, you don't have to know anything to just be there and be like, okay, at some point you're lying, because you're telling me two completely opposite things with the same voice and intent. It's going to be absurd. And the same thing here. It's just like, okay, so now the Wall Street hedge fund managers are the heroes and the victims, and victimhood, of course, being the highest moral standing under certain schools of leftism. Like, I'm supposed to care about Patrick Bateman? Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah, it's that whole thing of switching around the explanation for what was going on with the rioting, like who did burn all those cities this summer? Like, was it Black Lives Matter? Can we say it wasn't? Was it outside agitators? Were they mostly peaceful? Like, what was it? That's been interesting to watch. I also thought I had fun on Twitter prodding people about the Capitol Hill thing, where I'd say, okay, so why am I supposed to be more outraged about broken windows at the Capitol than I am about broken windows in a small business or something like that? And watching the responses, now a lot of them, you get real hardcore blue-pilled responses like, well, that is the center of our democracy and that and blah, 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 all this stuff, and so you can kind of like peel that away. You're like, okay, you're still really blue-pilled, like max level blue-pilled, that you think this building is so much more important.
Smurf level, yeah.
Once you get through that level, once you get through Smurf level blue-pilled, if you go right to the next level, like I live in a suburb outside of Smurfville, like still kind of blue-pilled, but not that hardcore. What it would basically come down to, the response is that, whether they'd say it this way or not, is that, but Black Lives Matter was good and Trump supporters are bad. It's really just that simple of that's what they have left. But everything they stood for was good. Let me give the most generous interpretation to their gripe and the least generous interpretation to the Trump people's gripe.
That's a perfectly valid perspective. It's a lot more coherent and fair to be like, I think these are good guys and I think these are bad guys. Okay, yes, that makes sense.
Sure. No, I actually think that is a better justification. The problem with it is that you have to go, if you're going to really make this a fair measuring stick. You have to actually go deeper to what their gripes are and what the level of legitimacy for each gripe is. So it's not fair to say about the Trump supporters, feel however you feel about it. It's not fair to say that they were attempting to overthrow the results of an election, because you'd have to at least acknowledge that from their perspective, the election was stolen from them. Now, you could say they're wrong about that, and so in effect, what they're doing is trying to overthrow an election. But you'd still have to prove that they were actually trying to affect the election results, which seems like a stretch to me. And you'd actually have to get into proving why they're wrong and you're right, that Joe Biden really won the election, right? So there's more. And then same with the Black Lives Matter side. You know, you could say, oh, well, they are just outraged about these cops shooting black people. But then you'd have to say, well, were these actually racially motivated attacks, blah, 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 all this next level. But it's interesting to see people try to grapple with both when they're not doing any of those. They're just going like, well, riots are the voice of the unheard, but not when it's Trump supporters.
Because that wasn't a riot, it's an insurrection.
Yes, right, exactly.
Hey guys, want to tell you about probably my favorite sponsor, Sheath Underwear. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice20, you get 20% off your order. Here's why Sheath is great. Invented by a vet who served time in the desert, Sheath keeps your boy parts safe and dry. Why? Because they have this dual pouch technology, one for one part of your anatomy, one for another part. The first time they brought them in the studio, I'm like, what is this? And I wear them every day because they're the most comfortable boxer briefs you're ever going to wear. Plus, if you do your squats, it makes your booty look really good. Or so I'm told. If you go, I can't see it really. If you go to sheathunderwear.com, I don't spend time staring at myself in front of the mirror. Why would you say that? If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice20, you get 20% off your order. They've got a lot of different styles and colors to choose from. They also have sheath underwear for girls. I don't know how that would work. Let's get back to the show. Are you looking forward to the impeachment trial next week?
Yeah, not too much. I think that Rand Paul effectively killed it. I don't think they have a chance to convict at this point. Rand Paul forced a vote on the constitutionality of impeaching someone who's not in office, and it's and he got enough Republican votes
like
that it's
45,
unconstitutional,
I believe,
that they couldn't convict. So now one of them would have to say it's unconstitutional, but still vote to convict him at this unconstitutional hearing.
This is very smart of Rand, and here's why. Because this gives them intellectual cover to be like, I denounce Trump, I have nothing to do with this, but the Constitution is about impeaching people who are holding office. This is a dangerous precedent. Do you want us to impeach? I can't do his voice. I thought I could. I can't do it. Do you want us to? Because this happened in 2000. There was talk about Arlen Specter, the late senator from Pennsylvania, who publicly admitted to switching political parties to get reelected and then lost. It's just very funny when politics is so screwed up that when people are actually honest, the voters punish them for it. He's like, they said, Senator Specter, why did you switch political parties from Republican to Democrat? And he goes, I did it to get reelected. Loses. It's just like, he's telling the truth.
Yeah.
He hasn't changed his views particularly. He's always been this kind of squished Republican. But now, he had said Bill Clinton could still get impeached after leaving office because you could remove his pension and all these other things that happen as a consequence of being former president. The Bush administration put the kibosh on that. But, this is something that they don't have to defend Trump. They could just say, I defend the Constitution.
I thought Rand Paul gave a great speech. I think it was around 10 minutes or something like that, but I thought it was a great speech, and I thought every point he made was really solid. And the first point was what you're talking about, the constitutionality of impeaching people who are no longer sitting in office. I'm not enough of a constitutional scholar to really know whether or not that holds up. But what the rest of the speech, he really tore apart the heart of the impeachment, which to me was the stronger message, where he was just saying, I mean, look, if you're going to say that Donald Trump incited violence when he said, let's go, whatever the words were, let's go, he said patriotically and peacefully, but he said let's go show them, what we stand for. He goes, what are we going to say? Who here in this body has not used the word fight metaphorically? the let's go fight for blah, 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 fight for 15 or the fight for this or that. Or he goes, now if someone's violent, are we going to go around removing people? Could we remove anybody who talks about police brutality if there's a Black Lives Matter riot or something after that? Like he goes, this standard is just ridiculous and it can't go out. And then the other point he made, which I thought was a really good point, is that he goes, you know, you got Joe Biden up here who wins a presidential election and says his number one goal is to unify the country. And so what are we doing now?
Well, he also said unified doesn't mean bipartisan. Did you see that?
Yes.
He said that explicitly, yes.
Right. But so, you know, it's like, so you're going to keep the white hot tempers of the election going by trying to impeach the guy who, by the way, got the most votes besides Biden in the history of presidential politics. I mean, like, what this is clearly just going to keep dividing the country. It's a strategy that can't be equally upheld against other political leaders. So I thought Rand Paul made a lot of really good points throughout that whole thing. And so I do think that this is going to fail ultimately. But I could be wrong.
There was a great thread on Twitter where some public school apparatchik was having a meltdown because this is something that I think this really, really triggers me a lot, like black-pilled people, because they're so focused on Washington and they're like, the Republicans are useless, true, in Washington, so therefore all hope is lost. I'm like, if you were looking for Washington for the answers, yeah, you should be black-pilled, because there's zero possibility that you're going to get help through Washington. So if that is where the focus lays for you, I can't help you, and you are right to be committed to your despair and nihilism. That said, you know, if you look at gun laws throughout the country on a state-by-state basis in terms of gun rights, how there's a GIF that's on Wikipedia, how it went from like no state having gun permit laws to shall issue, to must issue, to unlicensed. And I think the Republicans, if I'm not mistaken, passed reciprocity, where if you have a gun license in one state and you're traveling to another, you don't have to get in the other state, just like your driver's license, things like that. What he was freaking out about is state by state are now working to massively empower parents and families to have school choice and to have the money follow the student instead of having the money follow the institutions. Now, the worst people on earth are freaking out about this. Oh, this is an assault on public education, which brings us all together. It's like, yeah, I'm sorry, but increasing numbers of Americans correctly view you guys as indistinguishable from child predators. They don't view the predation as necessarily sexual, although the rates among public school teachers are through the roof, far more than the Catholic Church. We don't talk about that. But your goal by law is to break these students and remold them into the model that the state wants. You should absolutely be treated with contempt at best, regardless of your intentions. The way these people pat themselves in the back in terms of what they're doing is just, there's no point in having a conversation with them. So that is something else to be hopeful for, just as the gun rights thing happens state by state. So many of these states are now, and here's the other thing. If I'm a state legislator, public school is extremely expensive. And all the money is going toward these unions which are holding me hostage. So why would I want to further empower this, where I could say with a straight face, I'm spending more money on education, but now I'm saving kids in the process?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with everything there. And by the way, your comparison about the public school sexual assault epidemic compared to the Catholic Church, it's not only are the rates higher, but they're guilty of the exact same thing, covering it up, moving teachers around, like all the same thing. But it doesn't get nearly as much coverage. Look, the issue with this whole thing, with as you know better than anyone, is that this whole progressive thing is a religion. And this is, I was tweeting about this the other day, where I was like, what people really don't realize, right, is that the progressive era, like the real progressives back in the progressive era, they won. Like they won the country. They won. They got everything they wanted through. And by their standards today, everyone is a progressive. Everybody, with the exception of Ron Paul. There's no one who's not a progressive who's been in politics. Even Rand Paul is a progressive by their standards. And when I say that, what I mean are the major things that the progressives got through, right, was public schools, a national income tax, the Federal Reserve, like all the major things that they got through. Who's against them? Like what politician
Social Security,
actually social
the safety
security
net? Yes.
Yes. Who's against them?
Regulated monopolies.
Who is running against the New Deal, against, regulation of the financial sector? Who besides Ron Paul? I mean, Rand Paul might argue taxes should be lower.
There's someone named Joe Jorgensen.
Yes,
letters,
right.
hashtag letters speak.
I'm
Dave.
sorry, I forgot about her. I pulled an Alex Jones and forgot who she was for a second. But so you realize, it's like, oh yeah, they're all progressives, and as you said, this is a religion. I mean, I tweeted this a couple months ago, but I tweeted out and I just had the data in front of me because people were talking. Someone said something. Well, it was easy enough, just a Google search. But someone was talking about how public school teachers are underpaid. The thing that they always say. And I look at this and I go, well, look, public school teachers make X amount more than the average worker, and yet they work way fewer hours.
Yeah.
So how can you say they're underpaid? And oh my God, the religious triggering. I mean, you realize after a while, you're like, I'm talking to a religious person. This isn't an argument at all with data. And so what is the ultimate solution for religion? It's a separation of the state and the religion. That's all you need with it. It's like, you just need the state out of it.
I address this in my book, and this is a very kind of key point. The answer is they should always be paid more, right? And you go, okay, you can't write literally the word more on a check. Right. How much money should they be paid, and what is your determinant for this? And they either will shut down, or they'll be like, well, 10% more than last year. It's like, okay, why 10? Why not 20? Why not 5? And they have no answer. They just know they need to be paid more. Then it's like, okay, if these are people who are heroes, who are drawn to their job because this is something they love and have a passion for, which makes it's a coherent argument. Why is that 10% a year going to make a difference in terms of keeping them in that job, which they are uniquely suited and qualified to do, and which brings them so much joy? Oh, and the fact that, listen, if it's hard for you to spend your spare time grading third graders' math problems, then maybe teaching isn't – hero is a word we're using a little loosely here.
Yeah, really. Well, I love some of the responses that I'd get where I would be like, I mean, they're off at 3 p.m. and they get the summers off. Yeah, it's not exactly a long, it's not exactly a lot of hours. And then they'd go, yeah, well, 3 p.m. might be the time that they leave, but a lot of people put in work in other hours. And I was like, oh, you mean like every job?
Yeah.
You mean like every single job? Do you think that's unique? Oh yeah, it's really us. I actually put in less hours than what you see. I'll maybe count this as a half hour of work. No, but literally, dude, every job involves doing something at some point when you're not clocked in. Like, yes, welcome to real life. But then they tell you these stories about, well, they buy school supplies out of their own money. And you're like, yeah, that happens. Yeah, like, dude, first off, lots of people have to buy things related to their work. And also, it's not at all true that every teacher is buying their own school supplies. How much is
a school ream of paper? It's literally $5. That's 500 sheets. A stack, enough pencils for a classroom is going to be under $5. Tape is $1.90.
Let me tell you something.
Where's that? Are you buying turkeys?
I go to the dollar store with $100. I can take care of my entire school district and all of their needs for the year. I
also love this idea, like, oh, these textbooks are falling apart. They're so ancient. It's like, other than history, I'm sure the math is the same. It's like, well, I need the new numbers in. Like, I can't use this math textbook from 5 years ago. Addition is completely changed.
I guess there is new math, but it's stupid, and they'd be better off just using the old shit. Yeah.
So the rage they get into is hilarious because they're so insistent on being obeyed and treated with the heroism. I have one last question for you. Every Monday morning, good morning, Monday morning, I'm on Jesse Kelly's show. And Jesse's a hardcore conservative. Mm-hmm. I'm 99% sure he's a veteran as well.
He is.
Yeah. Great dude. And he had me on this morning, and I don't remember what municipality this was, but this was a cop basically telling someone to put on their mask, and the guy goes, I don't have to.
It was in Texas, I believe.
Texas. Yeah. And then he goes, I'm going to tase you. And Jesse sighed and he goes, I already know what you're going to say. But the thing is, I didn't have to say anything. You cannot sit here as someone who values freedom, who's watched what's happened with these lockdowns, and think, it's a bad apple who's tasing people for not wearing a mask. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't argue. And of course, so much of the center of the conservative philosophical worldview revolves around this, that you know what it is to give someone this type of power. And you know what this is going to, like, your whole worldview as a conservative, right, is that there are these fundamental flaws in human nature that we're never going to be able to completely eradicate. And so, okay, so you're now giving someone the power to do this. And you see right away in that video, what was it? Here's the problem. The cop's having a bad day. He's in a mood.
He's a human being.
And so he decides to take that out on a guy who committed the crime of walking into a store. And it's, you know, it's despicable.
The question I have now for these conservative types who are insisting that it's good apples, bad apples, I asked them, because it's just doing their job, how much money would you have to be paid to tear down a little girl's lemonade stand? And when you put it in terms of, because this is what they all do, right? Or most of them are comfortable doing this. They're like, yeah, you're absolutely right. That book, you know, No Ordinary Men, which talks about how the Nazis outsourced, you know, much of the genocide to local police, and how very few of these people had any qualms executing old ladies and children, you know, by the dozens, is very, very telling. And the point is, you know, Americans like to think we're somehow magic. But at the end of the day, I think people realize, all right, looking around, our magic has certainly kind of vanished into stardust. And this is not, you know, they had thought, and you can't blame them, right? For a long time, they didn't have the data. Like, when push comes to shove, the cops will side with Americans with freedoms against the overarching state. The overarching state came in, and all the data, with the very, very, very few exceptions, has sided with the state. And I'm shocked to, and I've been talking about this a lot recently, I'm shocked to what extent thoroughly blue-pilled conservatives are like, you're right, I can't defend this. They're not even attempting to do the cognitive dissonance thing.
Yeah. I remember listening back in the day. There was this Tom Woods speech. It was one of my favorite speeches he ever gave. I believe it was in Los Angeles. Could have been Las Vegas. I might be wrong about that. But he was talking to a room of conservatives and basically arguing the libertarian position. But it was like so perfectly done, where he was attacking the right from the right.
Yeah.
You know, like he was attacking them from their own conservative position. And he was talking about the wars at the time. But he was like, no, I'm sorry. Like, we are Christians and we care when people are slaughtered, because that's who we are, which is like the perfect way to do it. You don't rob someone of their identity. You tell them that because of their awesome identity, they have to feel this way. And one of the things he said that always stuck with me is he goes, I'm sorry, you have the conservatives, we lecture other people about the absurdity of moral relativism. Like, you don't get to go and have your own double standards with morality. If you believe in God and you don't believe in moral relativism, then this is either right or wrong. And these people acting this way don't get a pass because they're government employees. And I think that for people like Jesse Kelly, who is a really smart guy who prides himself on ideas and thinking about things, it's very hard for them to deal with that cognitive dissonance.
And it's incoming. I think people like us give people like him cover, because we hate, you know, the enemy class even more than he does. So he's like, all right, this doesn't mean I'm a hippie. Because you know, for a long time, that's what was the impression, because basically the hard left owned this idea of hating the police or being against them at the very least. And now it's like, this is just, you know, you're siding with the state or with mom and pop shops in Main Street. You know, these are your choices. And it's very, very hard for conservatives to side with Governor Whitmer as opposed to the pizzeria. This is, it's not even a question. Just like with the Wall Street stuff, it's like, you know, it's going to be really hard to tell, like, these hardcore Occupy Wall Street types that the hedge fund managers are the poor victims. It's like, even if they are, I'm kind of for it.
Yeah.
You know, like, even if they are being completely robbed and screwed by Russia, it's like, you know, it's kind of like, let's get the popcorn. I don't have a dog in this fight.
Yeah, I actually can't believe how much they've been able to pull the wool over the left size. You know, particularly when you see, like, you know, JP Morgan Chase, you know, pushing like Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. And you're like, you guys you get that they're your enemy, right? Like, they're not, you're never supposed to be on their side ever on anything. So, like, just keep that in mind. But I hopefully more of them wake up. I do see the trend you're talking about with a lot of people on the right. Waking up
shocked.
About the cops.
I'm absolutely shocked and stunned. It's just it's like a snowball effect.
It's the best development of the last year.
Oh, that's a good question. What was the best development of the last year? well, this wasn't the last year, so that kind of maybe you're still right. But
Yeah.
the kind of real hardcore anti-war caucus within the Republican Party, which has like a metastasized.
The fact that the talking point about Donald Trump is that there were no new wars is incredible. It's incredible. Even though, it's not as if he's really was great on foreign policy. But forget all of that. The fact that that is the right-wing talking point, not that he was so awesome because he bombed the shit out of them. And even it's not even like, oh, he defeated ISIS, which they could try to spin that out of it too, even though that's not exactly true. But the fact is the talking point is no new wars. And that's really amazing. That's really amazing that that's what they want to celebrate about the guy.
Dave, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
My favorite part of this interview is just seeing your beautiful face one more time.
If I had one, I'd show it to you. You are welcome.